Hook rides! Get your hook rides! Whee! Oof. Ah, hey there, and welcome to the new theater. What better way to hook you into the new space than these fantastic rides? And I swear they're not here to keep a certain logo at bay. Anyway, this week's movie is a catch you won't want to throw back. This is 1986's Blood Hook. On the idyllic waters of northern Wisconsin, all is right with the world as seen through the eyes of a kid watching his grandpa fish. That is until he disappears into darkness, leaving only a hat. I'm sure that kid won't be traumatized for life. 17 years later, we stumble upon Leinekugels and driving with very necessary exposition.
So how come you haven't been here in 17 years?
My family was so freaked out about my granddad's disappearance. It was a closed subject. But when I turned 21, the place became mine.
Cut to fish heads at Ludke's bait shack, and big city folks saying big city things.
Well, can't you people put some signs up?
Follow-up obvious questions are a tad obvious.
Do you sell bait here?
Yeah, you betcha.
I could use some minnows.
Also, why does he look so embarrassed about asking for minnows? We're left with a little bit of Wisconsin nice.
Remember, the lake's not a playground.
And holy shit! That's a big muskie. Elsewhere, I think Denny might be a little too into fishing.
Ah, it's a bigot.
Until he comes up against Finner and his tassels.
Hey, you can't use that pole. No tassels, sunshine.
Peter follows that up with a much less than stellar cast that shows there's nothing like waking up with a muskie lure in your cup. After a quick definition of a muskie,
the muskie, king of freshwater fish, is best known for its audacious eating habits.
And some fantastic views of Hayward, our young friends find themselves at the Van Cleese cabin, where they meet Evelyn, who talks about the things he loves most.
M16s, M32s, the Thompson 45 submachine gun.
Rod is schooled on the chief rule of the North Woods.
Rodney, you can't go around messing with other people's wood. They got rules up here.
And the group settles into some pretty swanky digs. Peter relives his grandpa's last moments before taking in the best in fancy cuisine at the
Little Loon Lake Landing.
Outside, a lover of loons uses a loon mating call, but is hooked by something that clearly isn't a loon. Later, Rod and Finner have a moment,
So how about you, Rod? You wanna go fishing? We can share my pole.
and we get the philosophy of muskie fishermen.
Muskie fishing is mean and violent, and it makes you do real crazy things. Gets in your head and you can't get it out. Muskies.
Yeah!
Muskies.
Muskie! 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 Well, maybe I got a little carried away. Finner hooks himself a beauty that he proceeds to carry with him, and Rod establishes a new trend that's sure to hook fashion-conscious people. Anne and Kirsten discuss Peter's inability to cast.
Casting is a symbol of Peter's trying to fathom the very deep waters of his trauma.
I thought I was trying to catch a fish.
And it's really quite insightful, I think. Unable to find someone to fish with him, Rod enjoys the outdoors while somehow missing a giant hook, which takes him to Monty Python levels of weird faces. As the boombox plays and cicadas sing, Rod is reeled in by someone looking for a big catch. Completely unrelated to this, we learn that Peter has perfect pitch, as he describes the devil's tritone.
Box time? That was thought to drive people crazy.
Peter and friends are soon called to identify their boat, which is covered in blood but lacking Rod. Peter finds evidence that Evelyn is to blame, but is left floundering when it's discovered Eve's rifle is just made of wood. Kirsten handles this with a level of verbal eloquence that isn't often seen these days.
I can't take it in, and I guess you don't want me to go.
As Peter is treated to a level of Wisconsin nice that most people aren't used to.
So why the hell don't you get off Main Street, asshole?
But after it's discovered Peter and Anne plan to drink wine instead of beer, I can see why they were treated so roughly. After Ludke drops some solid advice on the nosy kid,
A lot of things can happen out there on that lake.
we find his dad with a busted boat engine and no beer. I'm really not sure things can get worse. Well, maybe that's worse for us. Oh, never mind, that's a lot worse for him. Over at the festival, muskies are being weighed after dark, and they're somehow less limp than Peter and Anne getting it on. Elsewhere, both Kirsten and Finner's lady friend Bev have close encounters with a comically large muskie lure. Peter has post-nut clarity about the killer, blaming Finner, which lasts until we see him lend Ludke an ear, leading to a scene that nearly got Bloodhook an X rating for excessive gore by the MPAA. It's here we discover that Ludke is fishing for victims and turning them quite efficiently into bait. They're also suffering from the worst case of water-induced prunishness I've ever seen. Peter once again relives his grandpa's last moments, noticing a connection between the music and the cicadas. The Devil's Tritone rears its ugly head. It turns out Evelyn, the conspiracy nut, had it right all along.
Some dudes get shortwave on their braces and hip pins. Hell, I knew this dude in Cleveland with a steel pelvis. Got a hard-on every time the train went by.
Kirsten shows up alive and concisely explains everything that happened.
I saw something and I don't see the bitter cute.
Peter and Eve investigate Ludke's shop and find Bev's ring, as well as possible additional parts of Bev. Back at the cabin, Anne goes out for late-night meditation and is so deep in concentration she doesn't see Ludke row up. He captures her, and when she begins to psychoanalyze him,
Glad to give you the space to work things out, but
he does the obvious thing and puts her in the fridge. A plan is formed to draw out Ludke by using Peter as bait, but he turns into tuna, otherwise known as chicken of the sea. Morning arrives, and he replies in a Wisconsin nice way to Ludke's hello,
You son of a bitch, I'll kill you!
before bravely running into Kirsten's arms. He eventually regains his courage and learns how to cast like a champ. Unfortunately, we don't get a fancy training montage. He wants his revenge to be perfect, which is great, until he's the one that gets hooked. Before Ludke can change him into bait, Peter goes full boombox on him. The cops show up and he flees into the woods, where he may still be to this day. The half-assed love triangle says one final goodbye to the world's greatest monument of freshwater fishing, and we're left waiting for a sequel. Bloodhook is a 1986 slasher directed by Mallon. Most of the cast came from public access in the Twin Cities and only appeared in this one movie. It was shot in 6 weeks over the summer of 1985 and had a $200,000 budget. The original title of the movie, Muskie Madness, was favored by the cast and crew, but was changed when Trauma picked it up for distribution. They worried general audiences wouldn't know what a muskie was, so the title became the more generally ominous, but much less Wisconsin-y, Bloodhook. The large muskie monument featured in the movie is part of the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame in Hayward, Wisconsin, and can still be visited from 9:30 to 4 p.m. daily. Having been there myself, I can say it is quite a fun experience, whether you're into fishing or not. The Van Cleese cabin belonged to the family of producer David Herbert and was used in many beer commercials because of its scenic beauty. The interior of Ludke's bait shack was built in a Hayward area high school gym, and the exterior was shot in a local bay. Finner's prize muskie was a challenging prop to come by. Initially, it was created by the prop department, but definitely didn't look the part. A real muskie was obtained from a taxidermist, but after being used for nearly 3 weeks during very warm weather, it was described as quite gamey. You might say it ranks right up there with the stink of the Wheel of Fish from UHF. After Bloodhook, director Jim Mallon and key grip Kevin Murphy went on to help create Mystery Science Theater 3000 on UHF station KTMA in the Twin Cities. But that's a story for another day. I caught Bloodhook for the first time as part of a random afternoon of cheesy horror, and it was kind of magical because I found a lot of 80s stuff that I really enjoyed. I'm not sure I would have clicked on this by cover art alone, but I highly urge you to. Not that it's perfect, and I've talked to multiple people who, after viewing, asked if anything of note happened in the first hour. And they aren't wrong. There are tons of plots introduced that really don't lead anyplace. The initial script was so mammoth it had to be whittled down to a reasonable length in order to be made into a film. Frankly, it could have been cut even more to make a tighter, more concise movie. Evelyn and Bev's relationship, the love triangle between Anne, Kirsten, and Peter, and the history between Eve's dad and Peter's uncle are among those things that probably should have been fleshed out into something more memorable. But as the movie already sits at nearly 2 hours, they might have been better left completely on the cutting room floor. You can see the writers wanted to go for something more than just a typical 80s slasher, but in fishing terms, they used whatever this is, instead of proper bait like the bucktail lure, which is apparently a very solid choice when fishing for muskies. Thank you, Google. That said, I do still appreciate the fact that they didn't take the easy route. The Devil's Tritone was something very outside the box, and certainly better than the classic "the killer was born bad" trope that was so prevalent during this time. I love so much about this movie, but having walked the streets of Hayward multiple times as a kid on vacation with my family probably gave me a bias. Bloodhook is very distinctly Wisconsin, and it doesn't hold back on that point. The score used during the killing scenes was very repetitive, but the cheeky fish-based tunes made for the movie, including the weirdest combination of musky love and reggae you're likely to see, make up for it. The one thing I noticed on rewatches was the similarities between the one-off actors in this movie and well-known stars. Lisa Jane Todd bears a striking resemblance to Jennifer Grey. Greg Nenas looks like a young, husky Matt Damon. And Mark Jacobs, in voice, expression, and overall looks, could be the twin of Miami Connection's Vincent Hirsch. Bloodhook is full of goofy, unlikely kills, and acting that was, in cases, better done by that gamey Muskie than by the actors themselves. But it was fun and well worth a spin, whether it's Muskie season or not. As of the recording of this, it's pretty easy to find on multiple streaming platforms and Blu-ray. So don't flounder. Just check this one out for a goddamn good time. So what do you think? Suggestions for movies, trivial questions, comments, ratings, and my own giant Muskie monument would be appreciated. Thank you so very much for watching.